If you've been wondering, is there any way to recover from adrenal fatigue without medication? You are not alone. I hear this from people every single week, wondering if there are natural methods for this. And, a lot of them are doing all the things right? They're sleeping when they can, they're trying to eat better, and they still feel like their tank is empty. And they're waking up exhausted. They're dragging throughout the day. They're grumpy. They're irritable. They feel miserable. They can't do the things that they enjoy. And even if they do sit down to try to do the things that they enjoy, they either don't have the energy or they just don't feel that peace and happiness when they're participating in those activities. So today we're going to talk about whether recovery is possible, which, side note, it is, how long it can potentially take, and what natural steps can make the biggest difference. So firstly, I want to clear up a big myth. When people say adrenal fatigue, they don't usually mean that the adrenal glands are necessarily broken. It's more about miscommunication in your body's stress response system, which is the HPA axis. And I talk about this a lot on this channel when we're discussing nervous system dysregulation. So after months or years of stress or illness or pushing too hard, that stress circuit can get stuck in overdrive, right? We talk about that survival mode. And eventually it will start to sputter. But when you give your body what it needs, you give it the proper rest, the proper safety, the proper fuel, gentle support, your nervous system can recalibrate. So yes, recovery is absolutely possible, and it's not just a quick fix. So what happens when you are stuck in this state? Often it's going to show up as you feeling very wired, right? You're running on adrenaline, you're pushing through. You might be on this high at first, and then after a while, that phase flips into exhaustion because you can't run on adrenaline forever. And at that point, you might be drinking a lot of coffee, but even the coffee isn't bringing your energy back. And you try to sleep more, your sleep's unpredictable, it's not giving you more energy. You're probably tossing and turning, waking up at 3 a.m. You have a lot of anxious thoughts, your brain is racing. And the harder that you push, the more drained you feel. And that is your body saying, hey, we need to slow down before we crash any harder. So functional lab testing is a huge component in this. And what I use in my practice is a salivary cortisol test that maps out your stress rhythm. So it's not just taking your cortisol and giving you the information for one part of your day. It is you gaining information about your cortisol rhythm for a 24-hour period. So instead of that single snapshot, you're getting a lot more information. Morning, midday, afternoon, bedtime. You're going to see when your cortisol is high, when it's low, if it is too high at certain points. And that's going to give you more information about when to take certain supplements, when to do certain activities, what types of food you might need to eat, or what times of day are best, right? I mean, for me, I think most people with adrenal fatigue need small, consistent meals throughout the day until their adrenals start to kind of recover. But again, it can be different for everyone. So when you start to see the pattern on paper, things start to make more sense, right? And some women might have really high cortisol at night, and that's usually the tired but wired feeling. And then a lot of people might be completely flatlined. Their cortisol is super low. They don't have any energy from the moment they wake up. But your symptoms alone are not going to give you the full picture. I want to compare and contrast myself with one of my more recent patients. So we both had the same symptoms. We were both bedridden. He was bedridden for over a year. I was bedridden for 8 months. And we both were just exhausted all the time, both constantly having panic attacks, both had POTS really, really intensely. And so you would have thought that our test results would have been similar, right? His cortisol was testing extremely low throughout the day. My cortisol was testing extremely high in the morning, and then another spike in the afternoon. So, I mean, that alone tells you you cannot only rely on your symptoms. And it shows why lab testing can be so important in getting the right supplements, the right protocols, the right program for you, right? This is supposed to be custom tailored to you when we're talking about helping you with your health. So the oat test is something else that I like to use in my practice. Now, this is not going to give you a view of your cortisol and your circadian rhythm or things like that. What this one does is tell you, why are you so fatigued in the first place? So yes, your cortisol may be high or it may be low, etc. The oat test is something that gives you more insight into why. So maybe it's parasites that are involved. Maybe there's pathogens, bacterial overgrowth, or maybe fungus or mold that's involved. It can give you more insight into nutrients that might be deficient, things like that. So it's really good for getting to the root cause of things. So when you pair both together, they tell you what your body needs specifically and when, which is why I love pairing them together so much. So is it possible to turn this all around without medication? I think that is something that is a case-by-case basis for pretty much anyone that I've seen in my practice. I will say that yes, it is possible to make improvements without medications. So with adrenal fatigue or HPA axis dysfunction, medication usually isn't the first tool here anyway, right? So most women need to calm their stress response, calm their stress chemistry first, and then rebuild their reserves. So that means looking at your habits that are driving your system back into balance. What is going to be good for you specifically in your day-to-day life? That doesn't require a prescription. Your nutrition and your lifestyle do not require a prescription, right? So women who do best are the ones who stop trying to push through and do a bunch of really difficult things or overburden their system and kind of pull back as much as they possibly can in areas that they are able to do so, right? And then they learn to pace themselves so that their stress system can catch up and recover, and then they get to expand that window of tolerance and start branching out and doing more things. So let's talk a little more about what that actually looks like. So we're going to go over nervous system practices that can tell your body that it's actually safe, some simple nutritional strategies that can keep your energy more steady, and why tiny, consistent changes are going to work better than the extreme. Because recovering from adrenal fatigue naturally is not about doing more. It is about creating the right conditions so that your body can repair itself. So the first thing in natural recovery is learning to pace yourself. And I know if you have been living in survival mode, if you are a high achiever, slowing down is going to sound impossible, even if you're a caregiver. But here's what I see all the time. I see so many women who are trying to fix burnout by pushing harder, by adding new workouts, by adding new stressful routines, new supplements, when what their body is asking for is permission to pause. And that doesn't necessarily mean doing nothing, but it means taking a closer look at your day and asking, well, where can I trade that constant urgency for little small pockets of recovery? Right? Think of it like you're managing a bank account. If you keep withdrawing without depositing anything, that account is going to run dry. Pacing is how we start to make those deposits again. Those little pauses, those pockets of recovery that I talked about, those are your deposits. We also need to focus on calming the stress response. So the fastest way to tell your brain and your adrenals that you're safe, that you can relax, is to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. So you can do things like breath work where you're making sure that you're taking long, slow breaths and your exhale is longer than your inhale. Lying down, putting your hand on your belly, feeling it rise and fall as you take each breath. Gentle movements like yin yoga or even Pilates. Even just a few minutes with your feet on the ground outside, getting some sunlight in your eyes and some fresh air can tell your nervous system that it is okay, that we can relax, even if it's just 1 to 5%. And over time, when you add up these tiny little pockets of recovery, those deposits add up, right? Your stress chemistry starts to shift out of that emergency mode and into repair. So let's talk about food, because food is also very important. So when your blood sugar is spiking and crashing all day, your stress hormones have to pick up the slack. So that keeps the adrenals constantly on edge, right? Eating in a way that is steady, small, consistent meals throughout the day, proteins, healthy fats, slow carbs at each meal, avoiding those processed foods is going to give your body a stable fuel source. You also want to incorporate things like mineral-rich foods. So maybe sprinkling some sea salt on your food or sea salt in your water for those electrolytes. Getting in some leafy greens, maybe some nuts and some seeds or broths are, very beneficial. If you're someone who has a lot of histamine issues, I would take a different route. And a lot of women who do have adrenal fatigue crave carbs and crave sugar for a reason. The salt helps to keep the blood pressure and fluid balance stable when your cortisol is struggling, and the sugar is quick fuel, right? Your body thinks it's in emergency mode, so it wants something very fast that it can use very quickly and efficiently. We also want to protect our sleep. So your whole HPA axis is resetting when you sleep, right? If you can, try to keep a regular bedtime and a regular wake time, even on weekends. So make sure that at the same time every night, you're dimming the lights, you have your routine. Maybe you're setting like a blue light filter on your phone and having a warm cup of tea or reading a book and avoiding screens 30 minutes before bed. If your cortisol is flipped where it is low in the morning, high at night, this is going to significantly benefit you because it is training your body to help produce melatonin at night and reduce the cortisol slowly so that you can fall back asleep. And another part of this that can be beneficial if your sleep schedule feels very off or if you're having a lot of insomnia, waking up frequently throughout the night, first thing in the morning when you wake up, get your eyes in some natural sunlight. If you're someone who wakes up before the sun's up, wait until the sun starts coming over the horizon and just make sure that you can get outside. No glasses. You don't have to stare directly at the sun. Please don't. But just get outside. Make sure your eyes are in that sunlight. You're looking around at nature, taking in your surroundings, and that can help to reset that circadian rhythm as well. And finding a good provider that can work with you with supplements is also pretty beneficial, but it doesn't have to be a starting point, right? So when we have a lot of strain on our adrenals or our HPA axis, things like vitamin C, magnesium, B vitamins, maybe even adaptogenic herbs can be very, very beneficial, but only when guided by testing. So I would be wary of using adaptogens unless you've already gotten the proper testing, because your recovery plan depends on your pattern, right? So someone with high nighttime cortisol needs a calming approach. Someone who has a flatlined cortisol needs a rebuilding approach, right? They might need a little mild stimulant. So the point is, you don't need to throw the entire supplement shelf at this. Layer in your support slowly, one thing at a time. Notice how your body responds. And once the basics are in place, reassess and see where you can go from there. And this is the million-dollar question that everyone wants to know the answer to. How long does recovery take? So this is different for everyone, but what I most commonly see is that if you have a mild stress pattern, you can start to feel better in 3 to 6 months. However, if it has been years that your body has spent in survival mode, whether that is from trauma, whether it's from long COVID, whether it's from stress at work or a family situation, think in terms of 6 months to 2 years to fully rebuild. And that's okay, right? This isn't a quick fix solution. We are trying to deeply rebuild our life from the inside out to allow our body to regenerate. So if you hear nothing else, know that your body is designed to recover. You have that innate intelligence. So when you stop pushing and you start to create that safety, you provide your body and your nervous system with the proper fuel and the proper rhythm, your adrenals will come back online naturally. Adrenal fatigue does not have to be a permanent issue, and if you are looking for more information, please check out our links below for further support.